The telegram arrived on the worst day of Clayton Miller's life, 3 hours after they lowered Sarah into the frozen ground of the Victor, Colorado cemetery. He stood in his small ranch house, still wearing his Sunday suit, staring at the yellow paper in his hands while his 3 children cried in the bedroom down the hall. The message was from Rebecca Morgan, Sarah's younger sister, saying she would arrive on the afternoon train in 2 days to help with the children. Clayton had never met her, had only heard Sarah mention her sister back in Kansas a handful of times over their 7 years of marriage, always with a wistful sadness in her voice about how much she missed her. He crumpled the telegram and sat down at the kitchen table, burying his face in his hands. The influenza had taken Sarah so quickly he still could not believe she was gone. Just 10 days ago she had been laughing at breakfast, teasing him about burning the bacon again, and now the house felt hollow and too quiet except for the sobbing of Emma, who was 6, Thomas, who was 4, and little Daniel, barely 2 years old. Clayton was 30 years old, a cattle rancher trying to make a living in the mountains of Colorado in 1887, and he had absolutely no idea how to care for 3 grieving children on his own. The next 2 days passed in a blur of neighbors bringing food, men from town offering condolences he barely heard, and children who would not sleep through the night. Emma kept asking when Mama was coming home, and no matter how many times Clayton explained it to her, she would ask again an hour later with those big brown eyes full of hope that shattered his heart into smaller pieces each time. Thomas had stopped talking altogether, just followed Clayton around the house silently, and Daniel cried for his mother constantly, reaching his little arms toward the bedroom where Sarah used to rock him to sleep. Clayton stood on the platform at the Victor train station on a cold February afternoon, his hat pulled low against the wind that whipped down from the mountains. He had left the children with Martha Henderson, the neighbor woman who had been helping out, though Emma had screamed and clung to his legs when he tried to leave. He still felt sick about prying her fingers loose and walking out that door. The train pulled in with a screech of brakes and a blast of steam, and passengers began climbing down. Clayton watched each one, looking for a woman traveling alone. Then he saw her, stepping carefully down the steep stairs with a worn carpetbag in one hand and a small trunk being handed down after her by the conductor. She was slender and not very tall, wearing a simple gray traveling dress and a dark blue coat that had seen better days. Her hair was lighter than Sarah's had been, more honey-colored than dark brown, pulled back in a practical bun under a modest hat. When she turned and scanned the platform, Clayton saw that her face was different from Sarah's too, thinner and more angular, but she had the same shaped eyes, the same way of standing with her shoulders back despite obvious exhaustion. He walked toward her, removing his hat. "Miss Morgan." She looked up at him, and he noticed her eyes were hazel where Sarah's had been dark brown. "Mr. Miller." "Yes, madam, Clayton Miller. I appreciate you coming all this way." Rebecca set down her bag and surprised him by reaching out to grip his hand firmly. Her palm was calloused, the hand of someone used to work. "I am so sorry about Sarah. I wish I could have been here sooner. The letter took time to reach me, and then arranging the train fare took another week. You are here now. That is what matters." Clayton picked up her trunk, grunting slightly at the weight. "The wagon is just over here. It is about a 40-minute ride to the ranch." They loaded her belongings and started the journey out of town. Victor was a mining town nestled high in the Rockies, nearly 10,000 feet above sea level, and the air was thin and cold. Snow clung to the sides of the road and piled up against buildings. Rebecca pulled her coat tighter and gazed around at the mountains rising on all sides. "Sarah wrote to me about this place," she said quietly. She said it was beautiful but harsh. That is about right, Clayton said, keeping his eyes on the road. The winters are long, the summers are short. But the grass is good for cattle and the land was affordable when I bought it 5 years ago. How are the children? Clayton's hands tightened on the reins. Not good. Emma keeps asking for her mother. Thomas has stopped talking. Daniel just cries. And you, the question surprised him. Most people had avoided asking him directly how he was doing, instead offering generic condolences and quickly changing the subject. I am managing. That is not what I asked. Clayton glanced at her and saw she was watching him with an expression that was both gentle and unwavering. I do not know how to do this, he admitted. I am a rancher. I know cattle and horses and mending fence. I do not know how to be both mother and father. I do not know how to answer Emma's questions or get Thomas to talk or stop Daniel from crying. Rebecca nodded slowly. I do not know if I can fix any of that, Mr. Miller, but I can try to help. That is why I came. They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip of the horses' hooves. Finally, Clayton asked, "Why did you come?" Sarah said you two had not seen each other in years. 5 years, Rebecca said. Not since Sarah married you and moved out here. We wrote letters, but it is not the same. She paused and her voice grew softer. She was my only sister, Mr. Miller. We grew up together after our mother died. I was 12 and Sarah was 15, and she practically raised me while our father worked himself to death on a farm that never produced enough. When she left Kansas, I felt like I lost part of myself. And now she is gone for good, and I cannot get back those 5 years I wasted being stubborn about the distance between us. Clayton heard the grief in her voice and recognized it because it matched his own. She talked about you sometimes. She missed you. I missed her too, every single day. Rebecca turned to look out at the mountains again, and Clayton thought he saw her wipe at her eyes, but he politely looked away. The ranch house came into view as they crested a small rise. It was a modest structure, wood frame with a stone chimney, surrounded by a few outbuildings and corrals. Cattle dotted the fields beyond, dark shapes against the snow. Smoke rose from the chimney, meaning Martha had kept the fire going. They pulled up to the house, and before Clayton could help Rebecca down from the wagon, the door burst open and Emma came running out without a coat, her dark braids flying behind her. "Papa, Papa, you came back." Clayton jumped down and caught her as she threw herself at him. "Of course I came back, sweetheart. I told you I would. But you were gone so long." Emma sobbed into his shoulder. Then she pulled back and looked at Rebecca with sudden suspicion. "Who is that?" Rebecca climbed down from the wagon carefully and knelt in the snow so she was at Emma's eye level. "My name is Rebecca. I am your mama's sister, which makes me your aunt. Your papa asked me to come help take care of you and your brothers for a while." Emma stared at her with wide eyes. "You look a little bit like Mama." "People always said we looked alike," Rebecca said gently. "Though she was much prettier than me." "No one is prettier than Mama," Emma said fiercely. "You are absolutely right." Martha Henderson appeared in the doorway, a round woman in her 50s with graying hair. "Thank goodness you are back, Clayton. Thomas has been hiding under the bed and I cannot get him out. Daniel finally fell asleep, but he will wake up any minute wanting to eat." Clayton set Emma down and grabbed Rebecca's trunk. "Martha, this is Rebecca Morgan, Sarah's sister. Rebecca, Martha Henderson, our nearest neighbor." The women exchanged greetings while Clayton carried the trunk inside. The house was small, just a main room with the kitchen and sitting area combined, 2 bedrooms, and a small loft where the boys slept. It was warm from the fire but felt cluttered and disorganized in a way it never had when Sarah was alive. Dishes were piled in the sink, laundry overflowed from a basket, toys were scattered across the floor. Rebecca took it all in without comment, simply removing her coat and hat. "Where shall I put my things?" Clayton hesitated. He had not thought this through. "Emma sleeps in the smaller bedroom. The boys are in the loft. Sarah and I had the main bedroom." He could not bring himself to say, "I have the main bedroom," as if admitting Sarah was truly gone. "You can take Emma's room and Emma can sleep in the loft with her brothers, or you can have the loft end." "I will take the loft," Rebecca said quickly. "Emma should stay in her own room. She needs that stability right now." Martha gathered her things. "I left a pot of stew on the stove for dinner. I will check in tomorrow, Clayton." After she left, the house fell into an awkward silence. Emma had attached herself to Clayton's leg again. Rebecca looked around, then rolled up her sleeves. "All right then. Let me meet Thomas and Daniel, and then we can figure out dinner and bedtime." Thomas was indeed under the bed in Emma's room, and it took Rebecca 20 minutes of sitting on the floor talking to him softly before he would even look at her. She did not try to coax him out, just told him stories about his mama when she was a little girl, how Sarah used to climb trees higher than any of the boys in their town, how she once brought home a baby rabbit and tried to keep it in her room until their father found it. Clayton stood in the doorway listening, and he realized he had never heard these stories. Sarah had rarely talked about her childhood. Eventually, Thomas crawled out from under the bed and sat next to Rebecca, still not speaking but listening intently. He was a small boy with Clayton's dark hair and Sarah's delicate features. When Rebecca finished her story, Thomas whispered something so quietly Clayton could not hear it. Rebecca smiled. "Yes, sweetheart. I knew your mama her whole life. She was the best person I ever knew." Thomas nodded and then crawled into Rebecca's lap. She wrapped her arms around him and held him while he cried silently into her shoulder. Clayton felt his throat tighten and had to turn away. Daniel woke up screaming a few minutes later, and Clayton went to get him from the crib in the main bedroom. The baby's face was red and swollen from crying, and he arched his back when Clayton picked him up, still calling for Mama. Clayton walked him around the room, bouncing him gently, feeling completely helpless. Rebecca appeared in the doorway. "May I try?" Clayton handed over the baby, and Rebecca held Daniel against her shoulder, swaying and humming something low and soothing. To Clayton's amazement, the crying gradually subsided into hiccups and then stopped altogether. Daniel laid his head on Rebecca's shoulder, his small fist clutching her dress. "Sarah used to hum that to him," Clayton said, his voice rough. "Mama used to hum it to us," Rebecca replied. I guess Sarah remembered. They managed to get through dinner, though Emma was the only one who ate much. Thomas sat next to Rebecca at the table, and she cut his food into small pieces and encouraged him gently to take bites. Daniel sat in his high chair mashing potatoes into his hair while Rebecca fed him between her own bites. Clayton watched her move around his kitchen like she had always been there, finding dishes and cups without asking, wiping faces and hands, already learning the rhythms of his household. After dinner, Rebecca bathed the children in the big tin tub while Clayton cleaned up the kitchen. He could hear her in the other room, talking to them, making Emma giggle with a story about Sarah getting covered in mud while trying to catch a frog. The sound of his daughter laughing made his chest ache because he had not heard it in 2 weeks. Getting everyone to bed took over an hour. Emma wanted Rebecca to read her a story, and then another one, and then she started crying again because Mama used to read 3 stories every night. Rebecca sat on the edge of the bed and stroked Emma's hair, letting her cry it out. Thomas climbed into the loft bed without argument when Rebecca told him it was time, and Daniel went down in his crib with only a few whimpers after Rebecca hummed that song again. Finally, the house was quiet. Clayton sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, staring at nothing. Rebecca came out of the bedroom and closed the door softly behind her. "They are asleep," she said. "For now, anyway. Thank you. I could not have done that alone." Rebecca poured herself a cup of coffee and sat down across from him. In the lamplight, she looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes, but she held herself straight and steady. "You would have managed, Mr. Miller. People do what they must. Clayton. You should call me Clayton. All right. And you should call me Rebecca or even Becca if you prefer. Sarah always called me Becca." They sat in silence for a few minutes. Then Clayton asked, "What was Sarah like? When she was young, I mean. She did not talk much about Kansas or her life before she met me." Rebecca looked surprised. "She did not. She always said the past was past and there was no point dwelling on it." "That sounds like Sarah." Rebecca wrapped her hands around her coffee cup. "She was strong, even as a girl. After Mama died, Papa just sort of gave up on everything except the work. He still fed us and kept a roof over our heads, but he stopped really seeing us, if that makes sense. Sarah made sure I got to school, made sure there was food on the table, made sure I had clothes that fit. She was only 15, but she took care of everything." "What happened to your father?" "He died when I was 17. Heart just gave out one day in the fields. By then, Sarah had already met you. You came through our county buying cattle, and she saw you at the livestock auction. She came home that night and told me she had met the man she was going to marry." Clayton remembered that day. He had been 23, trying to build up his herd, and he had noticed the beautiful dark-haired woman watching the auction from the side of the barn. He had worked up the courage to talk to her, and she had smiled at him in a way that made his heart skip. "She told you that she was going to marry me." "She did. And she was right. 6 months later you came back, and 3 months after that you two got married. I had just turned 18. Sarah wanted me to come with you both to Colorado, but I was too stubborn. I had a beau in town, and I thought I was going to marry him and stay in Kansas forever." Rebecca's expression turned bitter. "That did not work out the way I planned. He married someone else 6 months later, someone whose father had more land than ours. I stayed on the farm alone for 2 years trying to make it work before I finally had to sell and move into town. I have been working as a seamstress ever since, barely making enough to pay for my rented room. I am sorry. Do not be. It was my own foolish pride that kept me from coming with Sarah when I had the chance. She offered to send train fare a dozen times in her letters, but I always had some excuse. And now she is gone, and I can never tell her I was sorry for wasting those years." Clayton understood that regret. He had his own list of things he wished he had said to Sarah, things he had put off because he assumed there would always be time later. Rebecca stood up and began washing the coffee cups. "I should get some sleep if I can. I have a feeling tomorrow will be another long day." "All of them are going to be long days," Clayton said quietly. "Then we will get through them one at a time." The days began to develop a rhythm. Clayton woke before dawn, as he always had, to tend to the cattle and horses. When he came in for breakfast, Rebecca would already be up with the children, having changed Daniel's diaper and gotten Thomas and Emma dressed. She would have coffee ready and oatmeal cooking on the stove. The house smelled like food and warmth instead of grief and unwashed laundry. Rebecca threw herself into caring for the children and the household with a determination that amazed Clayton. She washed and mended clothes, cleaned rooms that had been neglected for weeks, cooked meals that actually tasted good. She played with Emma for hours, building towers out of wooden blocks and playing pretend tea party. She sat with Thomas and read to him, never pushing him to talk but clearly delighted when he started to whisper responses to her questions. She carried Daniel around on her hip while she worked, singing to him constantly. But it was not just the practical work that made a difference. It was the way Rebecca understood grief. When Emma had a tantrum because Rebecca made eggs the wrong way, not the way Mama made them, Rebecca did not get defensive. She just held Emma while she screamed and cried, and then they sat together, and Emma told her exactly how Mama made eggs so Rebecca could learn. When Thomas woke up crying in the night, Rebecca climbed up into the loft and lay down next to him until he fell back asleep. When Daniel threw his food on the floor and sobbed, Rebecca cleaned it up patiently and tried again with something else. Clayton found himself watching her more and more. She was so different from Sarah, and yet sometimes a gesture or an expression would remind him painfully of his late wife. Rebecca was quieter than Sarah had been, more reserved, but she had a dry sense of humor that surprised him. One evening, after Daniel had managed to get mashed turnips in his hair, his ears, and somehow down the back of his shirt, Rebecca looked at Clayton and said deadpan, "I think he is part vegetable. It is the only explanation for why so much food ends up everywhere except his mouth." Clayton had laughed, really laughed, for the first time since Sarah died. Emma had stared at him in shock, and then she started giggling too, and suddenly the kitchen was full of laughter instead of tears. Rebecca had been with them for 2 weeks when the first real crisis happened. Clayton was out mending fence in the north pasture when one of his horses spooked at something and reared up, catching him in the shoulder with a hoof. He went down hard, and pain exploded through his right arm and chest. His hired hand, a young man named Jack who helped with the heavy ranch work, ran over. "Mr. Miller, are you all right?" Clayton tried to sit up and nearly blacked out from the pain. "Get me back to the house." Jack helped him onto the wagon, and the ride back was agony. Every bump in the road sent fresh waves of pain through his shoulder and ribs. When they pulled up to the house, Rebecca came out onto the porch, saw Clayton hunched over, and immediately took charge. "Jack, help him inside to the bed. Carefully. Emma, take your brothers into your room and play there for a while. Do not come out until I tell you." Emma looked scared but obeyed. Rebecca followed Jack as he half-carried Clayton into the bedroom. Once Clayton was on the bed, Rebecca carefully helped him remove his coat and shirt. Clayton gritted his teeth against the pain. His shoulder was already swelling and turning purple, and he suspected his ribs were at least bruised if not cracked. "Jack, ride into town and get Dr. Murray. Tell him it is urgent." After Jack left, Rebecca brought warm water and clean cloths. She cleaned the scrapes on Clayton's shoulder and arm with gentle efficiency. "Can you breathe deeply?" Clayton tried and winced. "Hurts. Probably bruised or cracked ribs. We need to wait for the doctor to be sure." She disappeared and came back with strips of cloth. "I am going to wrap your ribs to give them support. It is going to hurt." It did hurt. Clayton had to close his eyes and focus on breathing while Rebecca wrapped his torso firmly but not too tightly. Her hands were steady and sure, and he found himself wondering where she had learned to do this. "We did not have a doctor nearby when I was growing up," Rebecca said, as if reading his thoughts. "Sarah and I learned to take care of injuries and illnesses ourselves. Sarah was better at it than I was. She was better at most things." "That is not true," Clayton managed. "You are doing just fine." Dr. Murray arrived an hour later, examined Clayton thoroughly, and confirmed that his ribs were bruised and his shoulder badly contused, but nothing was broken. He prescribed rest, which made Clayton want to laugh because there was no such thing as rest on a ranch. But Rebecca stood with her arms crossed and informed him that Jack could handle the essential work for a few days, and Clayton was going to stay in bed whether he liked it or not. For 3 days, Clayton was essentially a prisoner in his own bedroom while Rebecca ran the household. She brought him meals, changed the bandages on his shoulder, and firmly shut down any attempt he made to get up and work. The children came in to visit him, Emma bringing him drawings she had made. Thomas sitting quietly on the edge of the bed, Daniel trying to climb up to give him sloppy baby kisses that made his ribs hurt from trying not to laugh. Rebecca sat with him in the evenings after the children were asleep, keeping him company. They talked about everything and nothing. She told him more stories about Sarah, about growing up in Kansas, about her work as a seamstress. He told her about building the ranch, about his own childhood growing up in Missouri, about the challenges of raising cattle at high altitude. Sarah really loved it here, Rebecca said one evening. In her letters, she wrote about the mountains and the sky and the way the aspens turned gold in the fall. She said she had never felt so free. "I did not know she wrote those things," Clayton admitted. "She seemed happy, but I always worried that she missed Kansas, missed the flatlands. She missed me, I think, and she missed our mother, but she did not miss Kansas." Rebecca paused. "She wrote about you too, how hard you worked, how good you were to her, how much she loved you." Clayton felt his eyes sting. "I loved her too, more than I knew how to say, she knew. She told me you showed your love in actions rather than words. She said you always made sure the woodbox was full so she would not have to go out in the cold, that you fixed her rocking chair when it got loose without her even asking, that you brought her wildflowers for no reason except that you thought they were pretty and she might like them." He had done those things. Sarah had always smiled when she saw the flowers on the table, had always kissed him and said thank you. He had not realized she noticed all the small things he did. By the fourth day, Clayton could not stand being in bed any longer. He got up carefully, ignoring the protest from his ribs, and made his way to the kitchen. Rebecca was kneading bread dough while Daniel sat in his high chair gnawing on a crust. She looked up when he entered and shook her head. "You are supposed to be resting." "I have rested enough. I am going to go crazy if I stay in that bed another minute. Your ribs need more time to heal." "My ribs will heal while I do light work." He poured himself coffee. "I promise I will not do anything heavy, but I need to check on the cattle, talk to Jack about what needs to be done. I will go slow." Rebecca studied him for a long moment, then nodded reluctantly. "Fine, but if you overdo it and hurt yourself worse, I am going to be very irritated with you." "Noted." He smiled at her, and she smiled back, a real smile that reached her eyes and made them crinkle at the corners. Something in his chest tightened in a way that had nothing to do with his bruised ribs. It was March now, and the weather was starting to turn. The days were getting longer, the snow was melting in patches, and the ground was beginning to soften. Rebecca took the children outside more often, letting them burn off energy in the yard while she hung laundry or worked in the garden plot. She was planning for spring planting. Clayton would see her through the window or from across the yard, and he found himself pausing in his work to watch her. He noticed things about her. The way she laughed when Emma said something precocious. The patience she showed with Thomas, who was slowly starting to talk more. The gentle way she held Daniel, swaying unconsciously even when just standing still. The way she pushed stray hair out of her face with the back of her wrist when her hands were covered in flour or dirt. The quiet strength in her that never wavered even when he knew she must be exhausted. One afternoon in mid-March, a warm spell had melted enough snow that actual grass was visible in the south pasture. Rebecca took the children out there with a blanket, and Clayton rode out to check on them on his way back from moving cattle. He found them having a picnic of bread and cheese and apples, Emma running in circles chasing butterflies, Thomas examining rocks with intense concentration, Daniel sitting on Rebecca's lap trying to eat dirt. "No, sweetheart, we do not eat dirt," Rebecca was saying patiently, removing a handful of soil from Daniel's chubby fist. The baby immediately grabbed another handful. "You are very determined, are you not?" Clayton dismounted and sat down on the edge of the blanket. "He gets that from his mother," She was determined, Rebecca agreed. When she decided she wanted something, there was no stopping her. She caught Clayton's eye and added softly, "She wanted you. She told me the day she met you that you were the one, and she was right." "I was the lucky one," Clayton said. "I did not deserve her. She thought she was the lucky one. She told me in one of her last letters that she had the life she always dreamed of. A good man, beautiful children, a home of her own." Rebecca's voice caught slightly. "I am glad she had that. I am glad she was happy, even if it was too short." Emma came running over and threw herself into Clayton's lap. "Papa, look what I found." She held out a small white rock with sparkles in it. "That is quartz," Clayton told her. "The mountains are full of it, beautiful just like you." Emma beamed and ran off to show Thomas. Rebecca smiled. "You are good with her." "I am trying. Most of the time I feel like I have no idea what I am doing." "That is called being a parent," Rebecca said. "Sarah felt the same way sometimes. She wrote to me when Emma was born about how terrified she was that she would do something wrong. Sarah was a natural mother. She always knew what to do. She learned, just like you are learning, just like I am learning." Daniel reached for Clayton, and he took the baby from Rebecca, settling him on his knee. Daniel grabbed at his hat, and Clayton let him take it and wave it around. "You are good with them, too. Better than good. I do not know what I would have done without you these past weeks." Rebecca looked away, but not before he saw something in her expression that he could not quite read. "I am glad I could help. Do you miss Kansas? Your work there?" "I miss nothing about Kansas except Sarah, and she is not there anymore either." Rebecca picked at the edge of the blanket. "The seamstress work was fine, but I was barely making enough to survive. My room was tiny and cold in winter. I had no real friends, no family. This is better. Being here with the children, taking care of them, having a purpose beyond just surviving." "You are welcome to stay as long as you like," Clayton said, and he realized as he said it that he meant it. The thought of Rebecca leaving, of the house going back to the chaos and grief it had been before she arrived, filled him with an unexpected dread. "The children need you." "Just the children?" The question was quiet, almost hesitant. Clayton looked at her, really looked at her, and saw something in her eyes that made his heart start to beat faster. "No," he admitted, "not just the children." They sat there on the blanket in the warm March sun, surrounded by the children and the mountains and the vast blue sky, and something shifted between them. It was not a dramatic moment, no declaration or grand gesture. Just a shared understanding that what was happening between them was more than just convenience or grief, more than just her helping with his children. That night, after the children were asleep, they sat at the kitchen table as they had done many times before. But this time, when Rebecca reached for the coffee pot, Clayton's hand brushed hers, and instead of pulling away, they both paused. Her hand was warm under his, small but strong. He could feel her pulse in her wrist, beating fast. "Rebecca," he started, then stopped, not knowing what to say. "I know," she said softly. "I feel it too." "It is too soon," he said, even though everything in him wanted to pull her closer. "Sarah has only been gone 2 months. I know that too." Rebecca turned her hand over so their palms were touching. "But I also know that Sarah would not want you to be alone forever. She would not want the children to grow up without a mother, and she certainly would not want me to spend the rest of my life grieving what I cannot change. She was your sister, she was, and I loved her with everything I had. But she is gone, Clayton. We are still here. And I think she would understand that life goes on, that we have to keep living even when it hurts." Clayton thought about that. Thought about Sarah, about how practical she had been, how focused on the future rather than the past. He thought she would understand. He hoped she would. "I do not want to dishonor her memory," he said. "Loving again is not dishonoring her. She loved you. She loved these children. She would want you all to be happy. Rebecca squeezed his hand gently. I am not trying to replace her. I could never replace her, but maybe I can help build something new, something good. They sat there holding hands across the table, and Clayton felt something in his chest loosen that had been tight since the day Sarah died. It was not that the grief disappeared. It was still there, would always be there, but it no longer felt like it was suffocating him. The next few weeks passed with a new awareness between them. They did not speak again about what was growing between them, but it was there in every shared glance, every accidental touch, every quiet conversation after the children were asleep. Clayton found himself thinking about Rebecca constantly. The sound of her voice, the way she moved around the kitchen, the rare moments when she let her guard down and he could see the vulnerable woman beneath the strong caretaker. He noticed other things too. The way she had started to look at him, her eyes lingering when she thought he was not paying attention. The way she would blush slightly when their hands touched. The way she smiled at him, different from the smiles she gave the children, softer and more personal. One evening in early April, Clayton came in from a long day of working with the new calves to find Rebecca in the kitchen looking frustrated. Dinner was burning on the stove. Daniel was crying in his crib. Emma and Thomas were fighting over a toy in the corner, and Rebecca looked like she was about to cry herself. Clayton quickly took the pan off the stove, scooped up Daniel, and used his best stern voice to separate Emma and Thomas. Within a few minutes, the crisis was contained. Daniel stopped crying, the children went to play quietly at the table, and Rebecca sank into a chair and put her face in her hands. I am sorry, she said, her voice muffled. I just got overwhelmed. Clayton sat down next to her, still holding Daniel. You have been doing everything around here for 2 months straight. You are entitled to get overwhelmed. I burned dinner. So we will have bread and cheese tonight. It will be fine. He reached over and gently pulled her hands away from her face. Rebecca, you do not have to be perfect. You do not have to be Sarah. I know, but I want to be good enough for them, for you. You are more than good enough. You are remarkable. The words came out more intense than he intended, and Rebecca looked up at him with wide eyes. These children love you. They have healed so much because of you. Emma is laughing again. Thomas is talking in full sentences. Daniel calls you Mama. Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. I know. He started doing that a few days ago, and I did not correct him. I should have, but I could not bring myself to. Why would you correct him? You are his mama now in all the ways that matter. But Sarah would be happy that he has someone to love him, that all of them have someone. Clayton set Daniel down and took both of Rebecca's hands in his. I need to say something, and I want you to listen before you respond. Rebecca nodded, watching him with those hazel eyes that had become so dear to him. I loved Sarah. I will always love her, and I will always miss her. But these past 2 months, you have become essential to my life in a way I never expected. I wake up thinking about you. I work faster so I can come back to the house and see you. I go to sleep thinking about your voice, your laugh, the way you care for my children, our children. Clayton, she whispered. Let me finish. I know it is fast. I know people will talk. I know it might seem wrong, but I am falling in love with you, Rebecca. Not because you look like Sarah or because you remind me of her, but because of who you are. Your strength, your kindness, your humor, the way you never give up even when things are hard. I am in love with you, and I need you to know that before another day passes. Rebecca's tears spilled over, running down her cheeks. I was so afraid to feel this. So afraid it was wrong or that I was betraying Sarah. It is not wrong. I love you too. The words came out in a rush. I have been falling in love with you since that first day, watching the way you love these children, the way you work so hard, the way you are trying so hard to do right by everyone. I love your quiet strength, your gentleness, the way you always think of others before yourself. I love you and it terrifies me." Clayton reached up and cupped her face in his hands, wiping away her tears with his thumbs. "Do not be terrified. We will figure this out together. I do not want to replace her. You are not replacing her. You are giving us all a chance to heal, to move forward, to live again. That is not replacement. That is grace." He leaned forward slowly, giving her time to pull away if she wanted, but she did not pull away. Instead, she closed the distance between them, and their lips met in a kiss that was gentle and sweet and full of promise. It was a first kiss, but it was also a beginning, a new start for both of them. When they pulled apart, Emma was standing next to the table, watching them with a very serious expression. "Are you going to get married like Mama and Papa were married?" Clayton looked at Rebecca, then back at Emma. "Would that be all right with you?" Emma considered this carefully. "Will Aunt Becca still be here? Will she still take care of us?" "Yes, sweetheart, she would still be here. And she would be our new Mama." Rebecca knelt down so she was at Emma's level. "I could never be exactly like your Mama. She was special and wonderful, and we will always love her and remember her. But I can love you and take care of you and be here for you every day. Would that be all right?" Emma thought about this for a long moment, then nodded. "Mama would want someone to take care of us. She told me that once when she was sick. She said if anything happened to her, someone good would come to help us and we should not be scared." Clayton felt his throat tighten. He had not known Sarah had said that to Emma. Emma looked between Clayton and Rebecca. "You are good, Aunt Becca. And you make Papa smile again. I think Mama would like that." "I think she would too," Rebecca said softly, pulling Emma into a hug. They talked more that evening after the children were in bed, about their feelings, about the future, about how to move forward in a way that honored Sarah's memory while also allowing them to build a new life together. They agreed to wait a respectful period before marrying, but they also agreed that they would not hide their feelings from each other or the children. The weeks that followed were some of the happiest Clayton could remember, even tinged as they were with grief. Rebecca continued to care for the children and the house, but now there were stolen kisses in the kitchen, hands held under the table during meals, quiet conversations late at night where they shared their dreams and fears. Clayton courted her properly, bringing her wildflowers from the high meadows, taking her for evening walks when Martha could watch the children, telling her every day in words and actions that he loved her. The townspeople of Victor had opinions, of course. Some thought it was too soon, that Clayton should wait at least a year before even thinking about remarrying. Others understood the practical necessity of a woman in the house to care for the children. Martha Henderson was firmly in their corner, telling anyone who would listen that Rebecca was a godsend, and that Sarah would approve. In late May, as the aspens leafed out and the wildflowers covered the meadows in carpets of color, Clayton asked Rebecca to marry him properly. He had bought a simple gold band from the jeweler in town, and he proposed to her on the same spot where they had picnicked that first warm day in March. The children were with them, playing in the grass, and he knelt down in front of her and asked her to be his wife. Rebecca said yes with tears streaming down her face, and Emma cheered, and Thomas clapped his hands, and Daniel tried to eat the ring box. They were married in June, 4 months after Rebecca had arrived in Colorado. It was a small ceremony in the church in Victor, with just a few close friends and neighbors in attendance. Rebecca wore a simple cream-colored dress she had sewn herself, and she carried wildflowers. Emma stood up as her attendant, very proud and serious in a new blue dress. Thomas carried the rings on a pillow, walking carefully down the aisle. Daniel was passed between Martha and Jack during the ceremony, babbling happily. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Clayton kissed Rebecca in front of everyone, and he felt Sarah's absence keenly but also felt her approval. They would never forget her. Emma and Thomas and Daniel would grow up knowing about their first mama, hearing stories about her, understanding that she had loved them fiercely. But they would also have Rebecca, who loved them just as fiercely in her own way. The years that followed were good ones. The ranch prospered, the children grew. Emma became a serious, responsible girl who helped with her younger siblings and loved to read. Thomas grew into a quiet, thoughtful boy who had a gift with animals. Daniel became a boisterous, cheerful child who kept everyone on their toes. In 1889, Rebecca gave birth to their first child together, a boy they named Samuel, and 2 years later came a daughter they called Margaret. The house that had felt too empty after Sarah died was now bursting with life and noise and love. Rebecca and Clayton built a partnership that worked. He ran the ranch, she ran the household, but they consulted each other on all major decisions and supported each other through the hard times. There were hard times. A drought in 1890 that killed off a quarter of the herd. A bad winter in 1891 when they were snowed in for weeks. The normal childhood illnesses and injuries that came with raising 5 children. But they faced everything together, and their love deepened with each passing year. On quiet evenings, when the children were all asleep and the house was peaceful, Clayton and Rebecca would sit on the porch and watch the stars come out over the mountains. She would lean against him, and he would wrap his arm around her, and they would talk about their day, their plans, their dreams. Sometimes they talked about Sarah, keeping her memory alive, making sure she was not forgotten. Rebecca never resented those conversations. She understood that Sarah would always be part of Clayton's heart, just as she understood that the love he had for her was different but no less real. One evening in the summer of 1894, when they had been married 5 years, Clayton said to Rebecca, "I want you to know something." "What is that?" "You saved us. That day you stepped off the train, we were all drowning and you saved us. You gave the children their childhood back. You gave me a reason to keep going. You gave us all a future." Rebecca turned to look at him in the fading light. "You saved me too. I was so lost after Sarah died, so alone. Coming here, loving you and the children, building this life that saved me just as much as it saved you. I guess we saved each other then. I guess we did." Emma came out onto the porch, 16 years old now and beautiful, looking so much like Sarah that it sometimes took Clayton's breath away. "Papa, Mama, Samuel and Margaret are fighting again about whose turn it is to feed the chickens." Rebecca laughed and stood up. "I will handle it." "Emma, can you check on Thomas and Daniel? Make sure they have finished their chores." "Yes, Mama." Clayton watched the 2 of them go back into the house, and he marveled at how that word, Mama, had become so natural. The younger children had never known anything else. Even Emma called Rebecca Mama now most of the time, though sometimes on quiet days she still talked about her first mama, and Rebecca would sit with her and share stories and memories. Later that night, after all the children were finally asleep and the house was quiet, Clayton held Rebecca in their bed and thought about the journey they had all taken. From grief and loss to healing and love. It had not been easy. There had been tears and struggles and moments when they both wondered if they were doing the right thing. But they had persevered, held together by love and commitment, and a shared determination to honor Sarah's memory by living well and loving well. "I love you," Clayton whispered into Rebecca's hair. "I love you too," she murmured back, already half asleep. Clayton closed his eyes and let himself relax into contentment. The ranch was doing well, The children were healthy and happy. His wife was beside him. Sarah would always be part of their story, the beginning of his family, the mother of his first 3 children. But Rebecca was his present and his future, his partner and his love. He was a lucky man, blessed beyond measure. He had lost much, but he had been given much as well. And he would spend the rest of his life being grateful for the day that telegram arrived, telling him Rebecca was on her way. The day that changed everything. The day that brought him back to life. In 1896, Rebecca gave birth to twin boys, healthy and loud and immediately beloved by all their older siblings. Emma was 18 by then, and already being courted by a young rancher from the next valley. Thomas, at 15, was Clayton's right hand on the ranch, strong and capable. Daniel at 13 was already showing signs of becoming a heartbreaker, charming everyone he met. Samuel at 7 and Margaret at 5 were inseparable, constant companions in mischief and adventure. And now there were 2 more, little Jacob and Joshua, completing their family. The house had to be expanded to fit everyone. Clayton built on 2 more rooms and another loft, and Rebecca filled every corner with warmth and life. The dinner table was crowded and noisy, full of laughter and arguments and the chaos of a large family. It was exactly the kind of life Clayton had dreamed of when he first started the ranch, the kind of life Sarah had wanted too. On what would have been Sarah's 40th birthday, Rebecca took the children to the cemetery in Victor. They brought wildflowers and stood around the grave, and Rebecca told them stories about their first mama while the younger children listened curiously. Emma cried quietly, still missing the mother she remembered. Thomas stood with his hand on his sister's shoulder. Daniel, who barely remembered Sarah, nonetheless looked solemn and respectful. "Your mama was brave and strong and loving," Rebecca told them. "She wanted you to be happy and to live good lives. She wanted you to remember that family is the most important thing, that love is what makes a house a home. I think about her every day and thank her for giving me the greatest gift I have ever received, the chance to be part of this family, to love you all, to love your papa." Clayton stood slightly apart, watching his wife honor his first wife, watching his children learn about their history. It was bittersweet, but it was also right. Sarah's story was part of their story, and it always would be, but it was not the whole story. The whole story included Rebecca's arrival, their falling in love, the family they had built together. The whole story was about survival and healing, about finding joy after loss, about love that endures and grows and transforms. That night, after everyone was asleep, Clayton found Rebecca sitting in the rocking chair in the nursery, watching the twins sleep in their shared crib. He came up behind her and put his hands on her shoulders. "Thank you for today," he said, "for taking them, for honoring her." "She gave me everything I have," Rebecca said simply. "She brought you into the world, she became your wife, she gave birth to Emma and Thomas and Daniel. Without her, none of this would exist. How could I not honor her?" Clayton knelt beside the rocking chair and took Rebecca's hand. "I wish she could have known you, really known you. I think you would have been friends." "I wish that too. I wish I had not wasted those 5 years being stubborn. I wish I had come out here while she was alive, had spent more time with her, had told her how much I loved her." Rebecca's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "But I cannot change that. All I can do is try to live in a way that would make her proud, love her children, love her husband, build a good life from the ashes of grief." "You have done that," Clayton assured her. "You have done that and more. She would be so proud of you, so proud of who you have become, what you have built." They sat together in the quiet nursery, holding hands, listening to the soft breathing of the sleeping babies. Outside, the wind moved through the aspen trees, making a sound like whispers. Inside, the house creaked and settled, full of the presence of all the lives it sheltered. It was a good house, a happy house, full of love and laughter and the everyday miracles of family life. In 1899, Emma married her rancher, a good man named William who treated her with respect and love. The wedding was at the ranch, with half the county in attendance, and Emma was a beautiful bride. Rebecca cried through the whole ceremony, and Clayton held her hand tightly, remembering another wedding years ago when he had married Sarah. Time was passing, children were growing up, life was moving forward as it always did. Thomas announced that he wanted to stay on the ranch and work it with Clayton, and Clayton felt a deep satisfaction in knowing that the land he had worked so hard to build would continue in his son's hands. Daniel decided he wanted to go to Denver and study law, and though it was hard to let him go, Clayton and Rebecca supported his dreams. Samuel and Margaret were growing fast, smart and curious children who kept their parents on their toes. The twins, Jacob and Joshua, were terrors at 3 years old, constantly getting into trouble and making everyone laugh. The new century arrived, 1900, and Clayton marveled that he had lived to see it. He was 43 years old, weathered by sun and wind and hard work, but healthy and strong. Rebecca was 36, still beautiful, still the center of their household, still the woman he fell in love with a little more every day. They had been married for 8 years, together for nearly 9, and their love had only grown deeper and more complex with time. One spring evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains gold and purple, Rebecca said, "Do you ever think about what Sarah would think of all this? Of us, of the children, of the life we have built?" Clayton had thought about it many times. "I think she would be happy. I think she would be glad that you came, that the children have been loved and cared for, that we found each other. Sarah was practical. She would not have wanted us to spend our lives in grief. I hope you are right." Rebecca leaned her head on his shoulder. "I still talk to her sometimes in my head. Is that strange? No, I do the same thing. I tell her about the children, about the ranch, about you. I like to think she can hear me somehow, that she knows we are all right." They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Then Rebecca said, "I am pregnant again." Clayton turned to look at her in surprise. "Are you sure?" "Very sure. I think this will be our last one. I am not as young as I used to be." She smiled at him. "Another baby to love, another blessing." Clayton pulled her close and kissed her temple. "You are the blessing, Rebecca. Every day with you is a gift I never expected to receive." Their last child, a daughter they named Sarah, was born in early 1901. She had dark hair like her namesake and hazel eyes like Rebecca, and she was adored by everyone in the family from the moment she arrived. Emma came to visit with her new baby son, and Rebecca held both infants, her grandbaby and her own baby, and marveled at the fullness of her life. The years continued to pass. Thomas married a girl from town, and Clayton helped them build a house on the ranch property. Daniel finished his law studies and opened a practice in Denver, but came home for every holiday. Samuel grew into a serious young man interested in breeding horses. Margaret became a teacher at the school in Victor. The twins were wild and reckless, giving Clayton and Rebecca more gray hairs. Little Sarah was the darling of the family, sweet and gentle and wise beyond her years. In 1910, on a warm summer evening much like the one where Clayton had first told Rebecca he loved her, they sat in their usual spot on the porch. They were older now, Clayton 53 and Rebecca 46, but they still held hands, still talked for hours, still found joy in each other's company. "You have any regrets?" Rebecca asked suddenly. Clayton thought about it. "I regret that Sarah died so young. I regret that Emma and Thomas and Daniel did not have more time with their mother. I regret the pain they went through, but I do not regret anything that came after. How could I regret the best years of my life? Even though people talked, even though some said it was too fast, too soon, even though all of that, we did what was right for us, for the children, and look at what we have built. 7 children, 3 of them married with families of their own, a ranch that is thriving, a home full of love, 23 years together. How could I regret any of that? Rebecca smiled, the same smile that had captured his heart that first spring. I was so scared when I stepped off that train, scared that I would not be good enough, that the children would reject me, that I would fail. I never imagined this. Never imagined that I would find love, would have children of my own, would build a life so full and rich. You were always good enough, more than good enough. You were exactly what we needed. As the sun set and the first stars appeared, they sat together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by the sounds of their family inside the house. Dishes clattering, children laughing, conversations flowing. The sounds of life, of love, of a family built through loss and grief and healing. Sarah would always be part of their story, the woman who made it all possible. But Rebecca was the woman who made it all real, who took grief and transformed it into joy, who took a broken family and made it whole again. She was the woman Clayton loved with everything he had, the partner who had walked beside him through every challenge and triumph of the past 2 decades. In the end, their story was a simple one. A man lost his wife. A woman came to help. They fell in love. They built a life. But simple did not mean easy, and it did not mean less meaningful. Their love had been forged in the fire of grief and tempered by time and commitment. It was real and deep and enduring, a love that would last the rest of their lives. As they sat there in the darkness, Clayton squeezed Rebecca's hand, and she squeezed back. No words were needed. They understood each other completely. 2 people who had found their way through the darkness to the light, who had chosen each other every day for more than 2 decades, who would continue choosing each other for all the days to come. It was not the story either of them had expected to live, but it was a good story. A story about kindness and healing, about family and commitment, about love that endures beyond loss. It was their story, and Clayton would not have changed a single chapter of it for anything in the world.